regulated. So I think that in order for the free market to work, in order for us to build this innovation, in order for us to make this happen, we need to fix this externality. If you talk about subsidies, we can't do subsidies to wind, this is crazy. We're already providing subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. If we're going to allow the free market to get going, if we're going to do this, we need to make sure that there's a level playing field. We need to take the 35-year head start that the 100-year head start that the fossil fuel industry has had and turn it around and say, we're going to level out this playing field. We're going to let the technologies like nuclear, like clean coal, like wind, like solar, have a chance to break into this market. We're going to be able to make this happen, and then we're going to let the free market go. So I think just sort of on that point, completely agree. We've got to let the free market go. We shouldn't just regulate, the government cannot pick winners and losers. But in order for the market to pick winners and losers, we have to have a fair market. And right now, the marketplace is broken. Just to shift gears a little bit, I wanted to talk about sort of this question of energy independence and national security as a climate change issue. And I think that pretty much across the spectrum, there's an idea that it's not a great idea for us to be purchasing a significant portion of our energy from people across the world who tend not to like us all that much. So, sort of for this, there's two sides of the argument. There's one side that says this is exactly why we need to pass climate change legislation. And there's another side that says, some sort of mixture of these arguments, and obviously this is going to be me characterizing it, but it says, no, we need to drill here, drill now. We need to drill our way out of this problem. And that's fine. I say drill here, drill now. That's all well and good. But I think that sort of a guy named Lindsey Graham, who's not a crazy liberal, he's actually rated about 90 from the American Conservative Union, not too that out there. I think he's got a pretty good quote on the matter, and he says, to jumpstart nuclear power, wind, solar, and the green economy, you've got to price carbon. How you do it is open and subject to debate, but the idea of not pricing carbon, in my view, means you're not serious about energy independence. And the reason for that is you simply cannot get energy independence if we're not pricing in the cost of the fuel that we're exporting all the way from across the other side of the world. So, to come back again, I'm sorry I'm jumping around a little bit, to this question of drill here, drill now. Like I said, drill here, drill now, but the fact is that if you look at, for example, the Arctic National Wildlife Reserve, that's something that said, hey, if we just opened ANWR, then energy independence wouldn't be a problem anymore. But I think the fact is we've had estimates from the Energy Information Agency, a number of other agencies that say, look, the United States simply does not have significant oil rigs. We can drill near, drill now all we want, but that's not going to solve the problem. So, sorry for a little bit of a rambling speech. There are a lot of things I wanted to talk about, and thank you.
So, first,
I'm just curious if you say that the free market's a solution. I've never known a time where government getting involved in a situation has helped the free market function. I mean, I'm not a big fan of, say, us providing government subsidies for fossil fuels, but shouldn't we try to take the government more out of the equation, as you're saying? So how is passing climate change legislation taking the government out of the equation in order to let the free market be most efficient?
So I guess I responded to 2 points. The first is great. So tomorrow let's just eliminate all fossil fuel subsidies from the budget. I think that'd be a great first step that you and I could probably both agree on. That would be really important for leveling out this marketplace. The second is that this is a legitimate point of contention. I mean, I think that you may say that the government should never be involved. I think that the government absolutely needs to be involved in the market, at least to regulate externalities, to make sure that when you're buying a product, if, like you said, if the product, if the price of the guy's finger is not being priced into this product, then potentially that's something that the government should look into. I mean, there's a reason why we have standards. You can't force your laborers to work 24 hours a day. I mean, I think that there are important places for the government to be involved. Like you said, the government shouldn't be involved in everything. That would stifle innovation. That's absolutely a huge problem. But I think there's this thing where you get this phenomenon where people are saying the government has done some bad things in the marketplace. Therefore, jump to the full other side of the spectrum, the government should never be involved in the marketplace. And I think that, it's not controversial in most circles to say that the government absolutely has a role in pricing in externalities and doing other, basically providing a fair marketplace for all technologies to come to the front. Making sure that having, the first mover advantage or having subsidies in the past is not, prohibitive to having a fair free market.
okay, so we're going to take one audience question.
Sure. You said that Econ 1A textbooks say that externalities should be corrected, and I totally agree with you. I've taken Econ 1A. They say that market failures, they talk a lot about market failures. But something that an econ textbook doesn't talk about is individual rights. And the system that you're advocating, whether it's cap and trade or whether it's environmental research government sponsored, is basically the government says you must give up your property if you want to emit carbon, for example. You must either give up your property, not produce the carbon, or produce and go to jail, for example. Or in case of the research, they're saying, you must, by force, we are forcing you to pay for this research, whether you want to or not. So my question is this a violation of individual rights? And if so, or if not, that means that you have a definition of what a right is. So I'm curious what your definition of an individual right is.
My definition of an individual right?
Yes.
I mean, I sort of assume that you're alluding to this sort of objectivist capacity. So my right, you know.
Very perceptive.
Look, I think Ayn Rand is a phenomenal writer. I also think she's out of her mind. I don't think that's an applicable society to the way that we live in a world with 6 billion people. I think it's all well and good if we're all going to go live back in the 14th century, that we all are able to take our right to the fullest extent. This is a legitimate disagreement. I don't have to hold that. I mean, I think that you've got to sort of look at how people's actions do affect. I think that obviously individual rights need to be balanced with collective rights, but if you're reaching a point where me doing what I want to do legitimately infringes on someone else's ability to use their individual rights, then you've got a problem. So I realize that's sort of a broad answer,
Well, my question was your definition of a right.
I don't understand that question.
Okay, so why don't we just move on and we can have time for final questions at the end. Why don't we give it up for today?
So I'm going to disagree a little bit with Dylan, and because one of the things is I'm not a believer in this idea that there's overwhelming evidence that it is man that is causing this global warming. Nobody's going to deny here that the Earth has warmed, and it has, but not at this point by an incredible amount, and certainly looking back at the history of the Earth, there's been plenty of times where the Earth has been much warmer than it is today, and certainly at the times there were no humans emitting carbon dioxide into the air. You know, one thing that Teryn was talking about is the future of the world is at risk, and we heard this back in the 70s. And why was the future of the world at risk? Well, global cooling. Global cooling was it was, according to several environmentalists, a bigger threat to mankind than nuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union. Now, granted, that was a fringe view, but what we have to understand is that the first Earth Day in 1970 was about global cooling and how big of a threat that was. That was because, not surprisingly, after World War II, up through 1970, a time when actually carbon emissions were just ballooning as the car became something that everybody had, at least in the United States and Western Europe, global temperatures went down, so it was global cooling. And now temperatures have risen back up, at least through around 1998. So now it's global warming, and since 1998 there hasn't been very much change. But the biggest thing here is there's something behind this agenda, and it's the agenda of giving the government a bigger role in regulating people's lives. And if people believe that the government should be the one that are telling us what we should and should not do, then it's going to be tough for me to persuade you that climate change legislation is not a good thing. Is not a good thing. But if you believe that you should have the right to do as you wish, as long as you really aren't harming anyone else, and you understand that we're in a position where we shouldn't have the government telling us what we should do, then I think that we should take a close look at what's going on with the climate change legislation. And after all, as much as we talk about market failures, there are major government failures. I mean, you take a look at, they talk about the wildfires in Australia a short while back, and that was supposedly caused by global warming. Well, there was also a lot of brush that was left around in Australia that was not allowed to be cleared away because, of course, that would hurt the environment. But when we leave brush all around, it's easier to burn. So you can't just say, okay, well, the government is the solution, because in that case, the government only exacerbated the problem. And the same thing if you take a look at, subsidizing and government providing disproportionate incentives for people to live in certain parts of the country. Well, then if a natural disaster hits that part of the country, maybe there wouldn't have been as many people there if we let the free market do it. So this isn't to say that everything the government does is wrong, because I'm not an objectivist. I believe that the government does have a role in our society. But what we do need to understand is that when the government overshoots its hand, it's not good, and government failure is as much, if not, and at least in my mind, a much bigger problem more likely to